Hey guys, my name is Ashley and I'm a mom of 2 little girls. I have a 2.5-year-old toddler named Kylie and I have a 6-month-old baby named Mia who is just about to start solid foods. A lot of you guys have asked me about my plan for how we're going to introduce solid foods to Mia, and we are going to do exactly what we did with my first daughter, which is baby-led weaning. So this video is going to be an introduction to kind of how to get started with baby-led weaning based on my own experience because we were very successful with it with my first daughter. And I am planning to do a total of about 4 or 5 videos for this little mini series just to kind of dig into some of the nitty-gritty details on the different aspects of baby-led weaning. Just a quick disclaimer, I am not a nutritionist, I am not a pediatrician, I am in no way an expert on this topic. However, I did go through this entire process with my 2.5-year-old, and I would say for the most part, she's a pretty good eater. So I thought that I might have a few tips to share with some of you first-time parents who have never done this before, and hopefully you'll find something that's helpful. So first off, let's start with what exactly is baby-led weaning. It's just a fancy way of saying that you skip the purees and go straight to solid finger foods for your baby from day 1. And by the way, the term baby-led weaning is actually a bit of a misnomer. The term originated in the UK where weaning actually refers to starting your baby on solid foods, whereas in the US where I live, weaning typically is associated with getting your baby off of breast milk or formula. And technically when you do start your baby on solid foods, you kind of are decreasing their milk intake, but in no way does that mean that you are pointedly sitting down and saying, okay, I'm giving my baby less milk now that they're having solids. It's actually quite the opposite. For baby-led weaning, your job is basically to just start introducing different solid foods and you don't touch your baby's milk schedule whatsoever. However many times your baby is still nursing or getting a bottle throughout the day, you're going to continue doing that straight up through their first year. There's a popular saying that food before 1 is just for fun. So that's important to remember during baby-led weaning. You're only introducing foods to help them explore and kind of figure out how to eat, but otherwise the milk stays exactly the same. And what's interesting is that as your baby gets a little bit older, like closer to the 9 to 12 month mark, you're going to see yourself that your baby is actually starting to consume more of the solid foods, and naturally on your baby's own, he or she will start decreasing their milk intake, but that's entirely baby-led, it's on their own. Now, because the use of rice cereals and purees have been pushed by pediatricians for so long, for many of us parents right now, the idea of introducing your baby to solid foods from the get-go seems like it's kind of a new thing. Maybe it's hip or trendy, but if you think about it, baby-led weaning has actually been around for centuries. Just put yourself in the shoes of cavemen or even people in today's society, but in third world countries where they don't have access to jars of baby food or the little pouches. They're introducing their babies to the same things that they eat. It's not something special just for a baby. They might mash it up a little if that's what they feel more comfortable with doing, but otherwise they're just getting the same foods that the rest of the family's getting. And if you find yourself gagging at the thought of pureed turkey, do you really think your baby is going to enjoy it? It's not exactly a first-class introduction to the joy of eating food. So I know that my general rule of thumb as a mom is if I wouldn't eat it myself, I am most certainly not serving it to my baby. Now this might sound all well and good to a lot of parents out there, but then their first question is, what about choking? And that is a totally valid concern. As parents, especially first-time parents, we're going to be very worried about our baby and their safety, and you should be. I know that I am very vigilant about making sure that my baby is not choking every single time she eats. I never leave her side while she's having a meal, just in case. There's actually research out there that shows that babies are not any more likely to choke on solid foods than they are on pureed foods when they first start eating. I will be sure to include some links to some resources about it in the description box below in case you're interested in reading a little bit more about that. The one thing that you do want to make sure that you read up on before you start baby-led weaning though, is that you understand how to handle choking if true choking were to occur. Of course, you can always take an infant first aid CPR class to make sure that you are 100% in the know on how to handle such a situation. And I will also include links to a couple of videos that I personally found and watched that I thought were really helpful that kind of taught me how to approach choking if my infant were to start choking, which by the way, has never happened. The one thing that I am well versed in is when a baby gags. Gagging is is 100% totally normal. It's a baby's natural reflex to get food out of their mouth that has gone too far back, and it's nothing to be scared of. It's pretty easy to tell the difference between gagging and choking. Generally, gagging comes with lots of sounds and facial expressions, which you'll actually see in this video today. And it's very common for babies in the first couple of weeks of starting solid foods to gag up a little bit because they're learning how to maneuver food around in their mouth. Even babies who start on purees will do this sometimes too. So it's not exclusive to baby-led weaning. If a baby is choking, it will be very obvious because they will have a look of terror on their face and there will be no air, no choking sounds, nothing passing through. And in that case, of course, that is an emergency. But for the most part, you're just gonna see a lot of gagging and spitting and things like that in the beginning. And then once baby gets accustomed to the feeling of food in their mouth and learning how to swallow little bits of food, the gagging stops. Some babies do gag a lot more than others. You just kind of have to feel it out. And to be totally honest, you have to like sit on your hands in the first couple of weeks while this is happening and try not to freak out because you want to remain calm. You do not want to alarm your baby. Oftentimes, it's a lot scarier for the parent to watch than it is for the baby. I can't tell you how many times my toddler Kylie, when she first started doing this, would gag things up and then just go right back to eating like nothing happened. One other thing that you might be wondering is, doesn't my baby need teeth in order to eat solid food? And the answer to that is no. When my toddler Kylie first started, she only had, I think, one tooth and it had just barely broken through the gums, and she had no problem chomping down on some broccoli. They figure it out just fine. Their jaws are very strong, their gums are very strong, and they power through it without a problem. If your child happens to have teeth already, then it's just a bonus. All right, so let's jump into what tools do you need in order to do baby-led weaning. I'm gonna come out right now and say you don't need anything special. If you wanna sit your child in your lap in a diaper and hand them a piece of avocado to eat, then that's totally fine. However, with that said, there are a couple of tools that will make things a little bit easier and a little less messy for you as a parent. So I wanted to share some of those things with you guys. They're things that we use in our house, and I would recommend them to other parents if it would make you feel more comfortable to have some of these things on hand. The first thing are bibs. You can use the traditional fabric bibs that most people have laying around. Personally, I prefer these little silicone pocket bibs because A, they're really easy to wash and reuse. You don't have to do constant laundry. You just rinse it off as soon as they're done and let it dry, and it's ready for the next meal. But also the pocket on the front is really convenient because babies drop a lot of food, especially with solid foods. There's chunks of things constantly falling down, and the pocket's just so big on this thing that it really prevents most of it from getting down into the high chair and getting squished all over the clothes and all over the high chair. So this is incredibly helpful. These are actually the same ones that I used with Kylie, and we are now using them with Mia too. So as you can see, they hold up really well. We have 2 of them and that's it. For slightly messier foods like yogurt and things like that, when you get around to it, some parents also like to use the sleeved bibs, which is kind of like a glorified art smock in my opinion. It's basically just like a waterproof kind of cover that you put over your baby, like a little shirt, and then it's open in the back right here, and then it just ties around and you just tie it around their neck and that's it. So they're completely covered on the front and on their arms, and then the back is open. And I found that really helpful for anything involving a sauce like spaghetti or yogurt, things that tend to just get all over the place. Things are still going to be pretty messy. Oftentimes babies will just rub it all in their hair. It'll be all over their eating space, but at least you can kind of reduce the amount of food that is getting all over their clothing. Again, you don't need these things. If you want to just leave your baby in just a diaper with no shirt on at all and hose them down when they're done eating, then that's fine too. Another great tool to have on hand is a crinkle cutter. This is perfect for cutting out the big chunks of food that baby is gonna try to pick up. In the beginning, they're not very good at it, and some foods tend to be a little more slippery than others. So having the crinkly, wavy texture on some of those foods, especially things like bananas or avocados, is really helpful in enabling your baby to actually pick it up successfully on their own and get it to their mouth. So it basically just kind of reduces frustration. Again, not necessary. In fact, I didn't even have one with Kylie. I just bought this for Mia and we've just started using it. As far as where your baby is going to be eating their meals, typically most people start out in a high chair. I feel like a lot of people really like the IKEA Antelope high chair because it pulls up to the table. There is a tray option as well, which I'm actually using right now with my daughter because she's a little bit short for the height of our table. But as she gets bigger, we can eliminate the tray and she can eat dinner at the table with the rest of the family. The other bonus is that it's a very basic high chair, no frills, frills, no fabric attachments, nothing, no little crevices. So it's really easy to just wipe down and clean off when baby is done with their meal. And I can personally attest to that because Kylie had a different high chair and it was a pain in the butt to clean. Once baby is crawling and sitting up really well and able to sit at a Montessori weaning table, which if you don't know what that is, I will link the Montessori eating video that I have also filmed this week up for you guys so that you can check that out as well. But basically, once baby is ready to sit up in a chair on his or her own, I recommend moving baby from a high chair to a weaning table, but that is obviously entirely up to your personal preference. If you choose to leave your baby in a high chair for the entire first 2 years of their life, then that's your decision. Baby-led weaning will work whether or not they're in a high chair or at a table. You also want to invest in something for your child to learn how to start taking sips of water out of. For some people, this is going to be a sippy cup of some kind, but personally, our family follows Montessori philosophies when it comes to eating. So we've started out both of our daughters on a small child size, or baby size in this case, glass. Yes, this is made of real glass, so it does have the possibility of breaking. These kind are actually made of tempered glass, and we've dropped them on the floor several times and they have not broken yet. In fact, the only ones that have broken have been 2 that I broke accidentally while I was washing the dishes because I somehow flung it across the kitchen and it landed on the floor at a really high speed. But my babies have both dropped these several times from the high chair and they've never broken. I will put a link in the description box to the exact set that we have, but these are literally just shot glasses and they're perfect for a baby's hands. They're just the right size. The fact that this one has ridges around the edges really helps the baby to kind of learn how to grip onto the cup when they first start. One of the videos that I'm going to be doing in this series is about teaching your baby to drink from an open cup, and you're gonna do this basically from day 1. So look forward to that video. I'll go into a lot more detail on how to do that. And finally, once your baby is ready to start using a fork and a spoon, it would be wise to invest in a small child-sized fork and spoon. The kind that both of my girls use are just a simple set that I purchased from a Montessori supply service, but honestly, there are tons of different types of toddler utensils out there that you can purchase, and it doesn't really matter which ones they use. The one thing that I will recommend is that they are made of metal. And I remember when Kylie first started using this fork, a lot of people, including my own parents, were very concerned about her poking herself on the tines of the fork. It never happened. Honestly, I think as parents, we worry about a lot more things than we need to. Next up is the foods. What type of food are you feeding your baby? Basically, anything you're eating is fair game. The one thing that you do want to make sure of is that the food is soft enough that your baby can eat it in the beginning. So the rule of thumb is if you can squish it between your 2 fingers pretty easily, then it's soft enough for your baby to eat. You can introduce foods to your baby in whatever order you want. I know that I personally started out with roasted or steamed fruits and vegetables, and then I kind of slowly worked my way through some of the grains and eventually meats. It honestly depends on your culture and what type of diet your family eats. There really are no hard and fast rules for this, so whatever you're comfortable with, I say go for it. The one thing that you want to avoid though for baby, especially in the beginning, are highly processed foods, as well as anything that has a lot of salt or a lot of excess sugar in it. It's not healthy for baby, and it's definitely not something that you want to start out their food journey with. This means that if you are preparing something for your family for dinner that you're planning to share bits of with your baby, you want to make sure that you pull out bits of it for your baby before you add any extra salt to it. Seasonings are totally okay, even spicy ones. I've definitely heard of some babies who actually really like spicy food, but I would urge you to start out small, give them just little bits at a time and kind of play it by ear. You also need to take into consideration your family's history of food allergies. Obviously, if there's something that someone in your family is highly allergic to, then it's a possibility that perhaps your baby could also have that same allergy. So you definitely want to consult your pediatrician before you introduce any of those types of foods to your baby. And in case you were not aware of this, babies are not allowed to have honey or cow's milk before the age of 1. Honey actually contains botulism spores, which can poison your baby basically and could actually kill them. So you want to make sure you steer clear of honey, and cow's milk just doesn't have the right levels of nutrients in it for a baby. So they always tell you to wait until 1 before you introduce that. Before the age of 1, you want to stick exclusively to either formula or breast milk. All right, so how do you actually do baby-led weaning? First, you want to make sure that your baby is very good at sitting up, mostly unassisted. This way they can actually sit in their high chair or weaning table chair by themselves. If they're slumping over constantly and they're not able to hold themselves up, then that presents a choking hazard. So sitting up is very important. Your baby should be showing a genuine interest in food. Are they reaching out for things on your plate? Are they making chewing motions with their mouth as they're watching you eat. These are all signs that your baby is interested and ready for solid food. Babies should also be capable of picking things up and bringing them to their mouths on their own pretty well. You're really not supposed to put food in your baby's mouth for him or her because again, that could create a choking risk. So baby should be able to handle food entirely independently. And again, realize that gagging is totally normal and it's gonna happen a lot in the beginning. I put videos down below so that you can recognize the difference between gagging and choking and what to do if your child does actually happen to choke. And finally, realize that in the beginning, not a lot of eating and swallowing is actually going to happen. For the most part, the very beginning stages of baby-led weaning are just about exploration. Babies learning how to pick foods up, bring it to their mouth, kind of get little bits off, move those bits around in their mouth, probably spit a whole bunch of it right back out. Some bits might get swallowed, but again, it's about exploration and learning how to do this whole solid food thing. So if you start a meal with your baby and hardly anything has been eaten by the end of it, it's just kind of been smashed around, realize that that's totally normal and to be expected. Your baby is really not going to start actually sitting down and thinking to themselves, ooh, food, I'm hungry, until closer to the 9 to 12 month mark. So don't expect a whole lot for those first couple of months. Again, you want to make sure that any food you serve is able to be squished between your two fingers so that it's soft enough for your baby to kind of gum to death and then swallow if they actually get a piece off. Once they have more teeth and they're a little bit better at chewing, then you can start introducing things that are not quite as soft. Until your baby gets better at picking things up with their pincer grip, so they're still using their whole hand in the beginning, you want to offer little sticks of food that are about the size of your finger. It's a lot easier for a baby to grab something of that size off of the tray and hold it independently than it is something that's super small. Around 9 months, when they actually start mastering their pincer grip, that's when you can start offering little bite-sized pieces of food and smaller foods like green peas and Cheerios and things like that. And if anything is super slippery, again, don't forget the crinkle cutter is really helpful in creating that texture that enables the baby to pick it up a lot more easily. The one exception to the squishy rule is introducing meats to your baby. And in that case, you wanna make sure that it's a pretty sizable piece. They're likely not going to be able to get pieces off of it in the beginning, especially if they don't have any teeth. So stick to the finger-sized pieces of meat or like a whole chicken drumstick or something like that. This way they can kind of get the taste and the flavor and kind of experiment with the texture, but they're not ripping off huge chunks that they could potentially choke on. As far as when to feed your baby, I would say start out with 1 meal per day. You can make it either breakfast, lunch, or dinner, whatever you're most comfortable with or whenever your baby is in his or her best mood. But just start out with that, and then as baby gets a little bit more adept at eating, and it will be obvious, you'll notice that your baby is actually taking off chunks of food and chewing them and swallowing them. Once your baby is capable of doing that, then you can start kind of upping their number of meals to 2 and then 3 times a day plus snacks, just like the rest of the family. And you can expect a typical feeding session to take anywhere from 5 minutes to 25 minutes, a half hour. It honestly just depends on your baby and how interested they are in the food that you've presented to them. Now, as far as where to feed your baby, again, hopefully he or she is in their high chair or at their weaning table. As I mentioned earlier, the baby could also be just sitting in your lap. The important part is that they are in a seated position to avoid a choking risk. On-the-go eating or absent-minded eating while your child is watching TV, especially when they're first learning, is not very safe. And not to mention, I would hope that most parents would want to teach their child to sit down and enjoy their meal from as early an age as possible. So you set up your baby's mealtime area, you've cooked the foods, you've decided what time of day you're gonna do it, you're ready to dive in. The first thing you need to do is remember to not give your baby too many choices. You wanna put 2 or 3 pieces of the food down on their tray at a time and allow your baby to choose what they're going to pick up and put in their mouth. Allow your baby to feed him or herself. It's very important that you never put chunks of food into your baby's mouth for him or her. No matter how much it looks like they're struggling, you want them to be 100% in control. The reason for that is because if you put a piece that's too big for your baby to handle and they're not ready for it, you could accidentally cause them to choke. Not to mention, self-feeding is kind of the spirit of baby-led weaning, so if you're doing it for your child, you're kind of totally defeating the purpose. As soon as your baby starts to show the dexterity to be able to bring a utensil to their mouth on their own. And this is going to be different depending on your baby. I know from experience that my daughter Kylie was ready to actually start putting a preloaded spoonful of yogurt into her mouth at about 7.5 months. Some babies might take a little bit longer, others might be ready for it sooner. It's kind of something that you just have to feel out and see what your baby is ready for. But don't wait to introduce a fork and spoon just because you think they're not ready. Give them an opportunity to try. If you get them started early and you basically hit their sweet spot when they're interested in learning how and they're capable of it, then you will find quickly that your baby becomes pretty good at it. And I know that by 11, 12 months, just before my daughter's first birthday, she was entirely independent with using a fork and a spoon and drinking from an open cup all by herself. And finally, you do want to make sure that you're giving your baby a few sips of water with each of his or her meals, not only for practice sake, but also to ward off constipation. Oftentimes when babies first start solid foods, it tends to stop them up a little bit. So having that little bit of extra water in their diet, again, not too much, just a few sips here and there, that will kind of help their body learn to process the fiber a little bit more easily. Okay, so for the last part of this video, I want to share with you just some clips of my 6-month-old Mia trying her first week of solid foods. So I will be following the same progression of foods that I used with my toddler because we, again, were very successful with it. So I see no reason not to go the same route. And because I am a total nerd about this whole topic, when I was doing this with Kylie, I actually recorded every single food I fed her, exactly how I prepared it. I took videos of Kylie also in case you're interested in watching those, just for comparison's sake. But I will leave a link to that blog article down below. So if you guys are interested in following the same progression and learning how to prepare these foods for your baby, all the information is right there and you can follow it like a roadmap. Okay, so that's it for this very long but very important basics of baby-led weaning intro video. As I mentioned earlier, this is just the first in a little mini series of videos that I'm going to be doing on baby-led weaning. In future videos, I will be covering how to drink from an open cup, introducing and using cutlery with your baby, as well as managing mealtime behavior and just kind of troubleshooting some of those common problems that parents run into. If you guys have any questions about something I mentioned in this video today, then please leave me a comment down below and I'd love to chat with you guys about it. And again, be sure to stay tuned for all the other videos that are forthcoming in this series. Thanks so much for watching and I'll see you next time.